So I'm David Long of the Norman Paterson School of International Affairs at Carleton University. In terms of my research interest with regard to Canada and the EU and topical issues in that relationship, of course the primary concern right now is with Canada and the European Union negotiating what's sometimes called a free trade agreement, but is in fact quite a bit more than that in terms of an economic relationship. This is a very important stage in Canada and the EU's relationship. But funnily enough, it's kind of an ironic, almost a postmodern moment. What do I mean by that? What I mean is, while it's important to understand that Canada and the EU are negotiating partners in this, the implications of the agreement are much, much broader. They're broader in the sense that the provinces are involved and must be involved, because some of the things that are being negotiated, whether it be public procurement or things to do with labour mobility, certification and so on, they involve the provinces. And so this enhanced economic agreement is going to change things in terms of the way that business is done in Canada, more than simply at the border when it is concluded. It's also a kind of ironic moment in the sense that I get the feeling that from both sides there's a desire at this point to negotiate this agreement because of the failure of negotiations multilaterally. So the European Union, while it likes negotiating with Canada and would like an agreement, frankly the substance of the gains are not that huge for the EU. What they're looking for is a template further forward, moving forward with economic integration globally as the EU sees it. From the Canadian side, this government in particular, and other governments as well, have been looking to free up the Canadian market. And one of the things that these trade agreements, whether the one being negotiated with the EU or some of the other ones that have been talked about, whether with Japan or some of the other Asian countries, all of these agreements are not just trade agreements. They're about resetting the economy in Canada. So it's a way of leveraging issues that would be much more difficult to do domestically. And the classic one there is supply management and things to do with agriculture and agricultural trade more generally. But overall, the idea of interprovincial trade is back on the table, I would say. Now, in terms of the EU and its relationship to Canada in the economic domain, CETA, as it's called, the economic negotiations, is not the only story. In fact, one of the other big stories that has caught my eye is the near trade war that we heard discussed that was going to take place, perhaps we were hearing, between the EU and Canada over the Fuel Quality Directive and what the EU was going to do in terms of taxing the tar sands. What was fascinating about this was, while at one level it was one of these dry committees that nobody pays very much attention to a lot of the time in the European Union, this was very important because the Canadians were concerned that all of a sudden our oil exports were potentially going to be tarred, so to speak, with this name for being excessively polluting. The ups and downs of that issue I'm not going to get into. I think for my part what is interesting is the way that Canada actually managed this issue. While there was a certain amount of huffing and puffing in terms of, well, there'll be a trade war, you can't slap this tax on our oil, this is a sideshow. For now, there isn't a huge amount of trade in this area between Canada and the EU. More importantly, what was happening was that the Canadians managed to avoid the Europeans moving forward on this issue. And it was the way they did that I think is most interesting. In my research, I've looked at the implications of Canada not being in the EU, but that the EU is an important international economic actor. And I've said that it's a bad idea to think that in international economic relations, it's either the European Union as a group, in which case you look at the Commission, or it's the member states, in which case you look at the variety of member states, in particular the powerful ones, or your best friends like the Brits or maybe the Germans. I've said, by contrast, on a variety of different issues, it will vary as to who will be the influential players. All of the member states are sat around the table, but then so is the Commission. There are technical groups and so on. And this oil sands matter is a classic representation of that. What happened was not that Canadian threats of trade war did anything particular. It was that the British, French, Dutch, and maybe others around the table, their scientific advisors, came forward with reasons not to move forward at this point. Now, part of the reason for that is that there are interests in Europe with regard to developing the oil sands in Alberta and Saskatchewan. That is to say, there are large multinational corporations based in these countries that have interests there. So while Canadians were maybe concerned about what would happen in terms of this new tax on Canadian oil, the way that the decision was influenced had little to do with the shouting and lots to do with a sophisticated understanding of the way that the EU makes decisions.